Hi, and welcome to a brand new video. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about how to create a gradient text in React Native. Now, first, before I get into that, I wanted to show that React Native has amazing documentation for learning how to do all sorts of different tricks, and so does Expo if you are using Expo in order to code your apps. Using the documentation will be super helpful when you want to learn different tricks, and I would always look at the documentation first before diving into trying to go to Stack Overflow or finding a lot of videos. Typically, your answer is right there in the documentation. So in order to create this gradient text, we first need to install a package. So inside your command terminal, you're going to do expo install expo linear gradient. And after installing this package, we will be able to create gradient text inside our app. So what I'm going to do is, as you can see right now, this is all text that is in app.tsx. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to create a new folder called screens. And inside screens, I'm going to create GradientText.tsx. And then what I can do is I'll just copy this basic code, paste over here, and remove everything I don't need. So you're kind of just left with this basic boilerplate code. And what we can do is here we import gradient text from screens.gradientText, and then we can use, instead of this text here, we can use gradient text. And now if we refresh our code by just clicking R, it will automatically reload our app. And as you can see, we don't see any difference. But if I change the text here to let, say, open app.tsx, now you can see that that automatically updated. So now we know that we've correctly connected our app.tsx to our GradientText.tsx. One last thing before we dive into actually getting gradient text is that I'm going to toss in a parameter here. And this parameter is, let's say, open app.tsx. And by this parameter, we'll be able to toss in custom text so that we don't have to redo our code to establish a gradient text every single time we want to use it. We can just pass in the text parameter, and then right over here, we can get the parameter of props, and inside text, it would be props.text. So what we did is that we just get a parameter of props, which is everything that's passed in like this, and then we want props.text. So props.text is defined right here. So now, as you can see, we still get the same piece of code, except for, let's say, if I say open GradientText.tsx, now it updates. Okay, I did all this simple code over here just to get a gradient text file. But let's actually get that gradient text. So in order to do that, we're first going to want to import linear gradient. And we're going to import it from the package we just installed into our project. So we're going to say from Expo linear gradient. And just to confirm, yep, that is the exact same package. Now I'm going to remove this text, and I know it seems like we did a lot of hard work to put that text, but don't worry, the text will come back later after we establish the actual gradient. And we're going to be using the linear gradient tag, and that's probably pretty straightforward. The linear gradient tag will create a linear gradient in the items that you put into it. So now if we do text/text, now we can toss in props.text right over here. But you kind of notice that nothing has really happened, and you're going to get this error if you did not install the package, just to be clear. So in order to fix that error, just install the package. But as you can see, now we get this undefined is not an object error. And that's because we haven't tossed any parameters into linear gradient. Like, what colors do you want the linear gradient to be? Where do you want it to start? Where do you want it to end? Linear gradient needs some required parameters in order to establish a gradient. So the first one is start. And start is where you want the gradient to start. So it's basically just the xy coordinate pair. So in order to do this, you just put two curly brackets and you establish x as, let's say, 0 and y as 0. So if we wanted to go from the top left to the bottom right, we're going to set the first coordinate to be 0, 0, and then we want the last coordinate to be 1, 1. So it's going to go from the top left, which is 0, 0, to the bottom right, which is 1, 1. But we're also missing something super crucial, which is the colors. So inside the colors, just put in the curly braces, put an array, and we want, let's say the first color is going to be red, and then we can set the second color to be blue. Now if you run this, we get our gradient. But it's not exactly as we want. It's in the background, and we want it to be in the text itself. So in order to do this, we have a couple of solutions. We need to add some styles to our text. So I'm just going to put styles. And if you want to put custom styles to your text, what you can do is you can say props.styles and then put more custom styles. So I'll just put this as default in case you want to do this yourself. So what this is essentially doing is that if you want to pass in like some custom styles, like font size would be 10, it's going to integrate the styles from the props, but it's also going to have some additional ones that we're going to set here. And it's just going to be background color is transparent. So what this will allow us to do is it will make the background color transparent. That's basically pretty straightforward from what it says. And now if we reload our app, you can see here that there's still no difference. So what I'm first going to do is I'm going to change this to style because this is style, not styles. And you're going to see that the font size changed. And I'm just going to make it 30 so it's a little bit bigger for us to see. But we added the background transparent, but it's still in the background and not in the text. So in order to do this, we need to install one more package. And before I continue, I just want to say that if you want to have a gradient button, this is exactly how you do it. You can add some padding and you'd be good to go. But we want gradient text. So I'm just going to first duplicate this code and create gradient button so that we still keep our code. And if we want to use it later, we can still have that gradient button code, but we want gradient text. So time to install another package. This one is a little bit more strange, but we're going to do Expo install React Native MaskedView / MaskedView. And this will allow us to basically mask the gradient from the background onto the text letters itself, allowing us to get gradient text. So after installing the package, you're going to want to do import MaskedView from that same package name. So after we imported MaskedView, just change the view here to MaskedView. And if I refresh, I notice that this code is running the gradient button code. So to fix that, just remove the default from these and then go over to app.txx and change this to a parenthesis. So the parenthesis means that it's exporting more than one, or it's not exporting default. So when you're not exporting default, you put the parentheses around it, and when you are exporting default, you don't put the curly braces around it. So now we get the text that we want, but another error. Because again, we're missing a parameter from the mask view. So essentially what we're missing is the element that we're masking. In an unlike linear gradient, the element that you're masking is not between the two elements. We put it as a parameter called masked element. And now, when we refresh our code, everything's missing. And another error, it's because there's no space for the text. It's like the width is 0. It's masking the element, but you see there's nowhere to mask it to. There's nothing inside the linear gradient. So I'm just going to put the same text, but instead of making the background color transparent, I'm just going to make the opacity 0. And now what this did is that it gave it a place to mask onto. So now established the width and height to be exactly the length of the text, and it just masked the gradient right on top of that width and height. So I know that this process was a bit confusing, but just as a recap, what we first did is we integrated a linear gradient and put our text between it. And this is what you call you can do a gradient button with this. However, we wanted gradient text. So instead of putting a view around it, we changed it to a masked view, where we can mask an element we can mask an element to have uh, the whatever is in between the mask view as its color. So we did this by integrating a linear gradient and having that as the color for the masked element of a text, allowing us to get gradient text. So hope this video was helpful, and see you in the next video.